Welcome to this analysis that we're doing about the top 20 public companies in the world. And today, also, it's one of my favorite companies. Probably because when a couple of years ago, that I wrote a book. This book it's Principles for Capital Allocation, and one of my conclusions is that a business is an algorithm to solve problems of people, and the idea of the algorithm is to make a profit, to capitalize, and then expand the capacity of this solution to the problem, because life is always changing and new problems arise all the time, and that's the reason why I call it an algorithm. It's part of I'm getting this idea from Peter Thiel, that he says that technology is an algorithm, so business is a technology. And to me, Google is the example of the perfect algorithm that became a business. No? And the story is very, very, very nice. So is these two gentlemen, the co-founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Both were born in 1973, and the stories are very, very different. No? In some sense, they are different, and in some sense, they are very similar, because both were little kids that were raised in these environments where his parents or families are very intense in the computers, mathematics, algebra, no? And however, the stories are very, very different. For instance, Larry Page was more in this environment where things were easier than from Sergey Brin, because uh, both are from Jewish backgrounds or families. But for instance, Larry Page, since he was a kid, had this access to popular science magazines, technology magazines, computers, etc. And although Sergey Brin is from the same age, he was born in what was before the Soviet Union. And when he was 4 years old, his father returned from a mathematics conference in Poland, and he announced that it was the time for his family to emigrate. So they first went to Vienna, but then his father was able to secure a job in the University of Maryland. So they arrived in 1979 when Sergey Brin was 6 years old. And in the meantime, well, Larry Page was using his time. When he was 6 years old, he was playing with computers and disarming them and putting them together again with his little brother. And see, Brin, he enrolled in the same university where his father was a teacher, and then he was received as Bachelor of Science in 1990 from the Department of Computer Science with honors and of Computer Science and Mathematics. And Larry Page, he attended first the Montessori school, and then he went to the University of Michigan, and there he also came from Bachelor of Science in Computer Engineering. So by 1993, he interned at Wolfram Research. He went to Palo Alto, and then Brin also went to Stanford University, and then they enrolled both in Stanford University. And when they met each other, they noticed that they have very opposite ideas about the future of life, of the computing world, and of internet. And they were in this orientation of new students at Stanford, and that's where Sergey Brin met Larry Page, no? So they were disagreeing, but at the same time they found out that they were intellectual soulmates, and then they became very close friends, no? So yeah, at that point, when, for instance, Sergey Brin was more interested in finding out data mining, etc., Sergey Brin was asking this question about what would be the future of internet, because he suddenly found that everything was linked, and like if you or the idea of internet was that everything had these hyperlinks, and he try to understand how would it be seen as a network, and that's how Larry Page and Sergey Brin wrote this paper that it's called The Anatomy of a Large-Scale Hypertextual Web Search Engine. And this became a very, very downloaded paper of scientific documents in the history of internet at that time. And with that thesis of having an algorithm that crawls around all the internet and gets information of all these hyperlinks around the internet, that's how they conceived a company called Backrow. And at that moment when they started, they put in Larry Page's dormitory of Stanford, they put together some servers and they built their own crawler. And then at some point they put into problems the computing systems of the University of Stanford, no? So it was very, very fascinating, this discovery of the algorithm that crawls around the internet and gets information, because this is the cornerstone of the searcher. If you want to search something, everything is classified through this algorithm of computer, no? So that's how they started putting together this algorithm, and suddenly, to scale the power of this machine or of this crawler, they made this round among faculty members and family and friends, and they were able to get some money to buy more servers and rent a garage in Menlo Park, no? At some point, this gentleman, Andy Bechtolsheim, he wrote a $100,000 check to Google Inc., but the company wasn't even incorporated, so they couldn't cash the check of $100,000 for this startup. And however, they just went with this idea of getting into reality this concept that they worked together in the paper, no? So by 1997 they registered the name google.com, and Google comes from it's a misspelling of Google that represents one divided by 1 followed by 100,000 zeros, if I'm correct, and that's how they want to say with one word the extension of what they are proposing, or the value that they are adding to the word, no? That we have a very, very important or big development, which is internet, and everybody is inputting a lot of knowledge into this internet, and what they try to say is that they are harnessing. It's 1 followed by 100 zeros, not 100,000. So I made a mistake. So when they just started, they appointed Larry Page as the CEO of Google, and from 1998 to as they were scaling, and these funds from Silicon Valley got involved, and first they secured $12 million and then $25 million, etc. So by Sequoia Capital, so they encouraged Sergey Brin and Larry Page to hire a CEO, and so that's how they got involved with Eric Schmidt, who was somehow like an adult executive. So when he got involved, then the company began to operate more as a company. However, in the core of Google was the machine and the innovation and the engineering from Larry Page and Sergey Brin. And then they became, by June of 2000, Google had indexed around 1 billion internet URLs, which is Uniform Resource Locator. And so there were around 1 billion web pages at that moment, and Google provided access to half of that, you know? So in 2000, Google, they weren't necessarily profitable because they were giving the service for free, So they began to sell advertisement associated with search keywords. So whenever you typed a keyword, they would sell advertise that they were gonna position in the top of the page. This is all about eye rolls, eyeballs. So that's their business, the attention that you put and the possibility that someone pays to appear in the top of the search. No? So by 2003, they acquired Pyra Labs, which is the owner of Blogger website. So that's how they became more in the position of controlling the blogs, the blogosphere, which was the first of the type of businesses. It wasn't necessarily e-commerce, but people input information through blogs. So in 2004, Google went to as a public company, and in 2005, Larry Page led the acquisition of Android for $50 million to fulfill his ambitions to place handheld computers in the possession of consumers so that they could access Google anywhere. So that's where one of the biggest ideas was to push the use of Google through the cell phones, no? And by June 2005, Google was valued nearly $52 billion, which becoming one of the world's biggest media companies. And in 2006, Google acquired YouTube for $1.6 billion. And in 2008, Google acquired DoubleClick for $3 billion, transferring to Google valuable relationships that DoubleClick had with web publishers and advertising agencies. So by 2010, almost 18% of the handset market consisted of Android sales. Then that's how they overtook Apple for the first time, and it became the world's most popular mobile operating system. By 2011, Larry Page became the CEO of Alphabet, or for Google, and then Schmidt stepped down to become an executive chairman. And at that moment, the company had already 24,000 employees. In 2011, the monthly unique visitors of Google surpassed 1 billion for the first time. In 2011, also, they spent 12 billion acquiring Motorola Mobility, first because they needed to secure patents to protect Android from lawsuits by companies like Apple Inc. And by 2011, Google was handling approximately 3 billion searches per day. In 2013, Page launched the independent Calico Initiative, a research and development project in the field of biotechnology. And by 2014, they sold Motorola Mobility for $2.19 billion to Lenovo. So this represented a loss. So they not always made good decisions. However, by 2015, Larry Page stepped down as CEO of Alphabet. They reorganized their interest of Google, and then they became Alphabet with Google as its leading subsidiary. So now they migrated from being the Google search machine, and they became more of a collection of businesses related to internet. No? So by 2019, Google announced that it would enter the video game market, launching a cloud gaming platform called Google Stadia. And this is basically what happens to Alphabet. Let's look at this slide that I like. Now Sundar Pichai is the CEO of Alphabet, and look how impressive. 10 years ago, the total assets of Alphabet was 70 billion, and now they became to be $330 billion. And see how property and equipment, that's probably because of the data centers where they have all these servers, went from $9.5 billion in 2010 to almost $90 billion 10 years later. No? And investment in businesses, this is what I was telling you, which is very interesting, which 10 years ago they had investments of $300 million, and now they have $21 billion. So Google is not only this search engine, but it's a lot of businesses where they fund initiatives. No? And they have almost $140 billion of cash an equivalence. Probably it's part of the very interesting business that they have. See, I put here the type of revenues that they receive, the underlying business. Remember, I told you that YouTube was acquired by $1 billion, no? But this type of businesses in the correct hands, doing the correct synergies, now YouTube revenue is around $20 billion, no? And from Google Ad revenues, before they used to make $34 billion 10 years ago, and now it has become $130 billion per year, no? So look at this, for the total revenue that they used to have in 2010, when it was $35 billion, almost one third became net income. That's the type of business that Google represents, no? And now the total revenues that are around $190 billion, almost $42 billion are net income, no? Although they have this large investment in research and development, this is cash machine, a money machine. That's what a lot of people like about Google, no? And I personally like a lot, because this is the very, very good example that businesses are algorithms. So if you want to know more about investments, please get into our website or send us a message. I'll be very happy to hear from you and know your comments. And thank you very much for taking your time to hear us, and have a great day.